All right, we'll continue. Let's continue with what we learned yesterday from a speech of the Lubavitcher Rebbe about this week's Torah portion, which is Parshat Bo, which in this week's Torah portion, it talks about the Jews getting out of Egypt, beginning to leave Egypt. The last three plagues. And in order for them to actually make use of the freedom that God has given them and to actually leave Egypt, so they had to take a paschal sacrifice, a lamb or a goat, take it into their house for several days, and then slaughter it. We learned about that previously, and the bravery that they had in order to do that, because that was the God of the Egyptians, and the God of the Egyptians were bound to ask them, what are you tying up a goat in your house for? It's our God. And, see the other? Yeah. And if they say, well, we're going to kill it. Let me just find the place for you here. I'll give you a book so you can be with me. There we go. There. And they weren't afraid. And so this defiance that they had, this power of defiance, was a sign that they had what it took to not only leave Egypt, but to stay out of Egypt, and not only to leave Egypt in a physical way, but most important, to leave it in a spiritual way. Their souls would be not affected by the limitations of the negative things in this world. That was the first speech that we had. The second speech is another interesting detail of this week's Torah portion is that the Jews were commanded before they left Egypt to eat matzah. They had to eat the Pesach, this paschal lamb. They had to slaughter it and roast it and then eat it together with matzah. It's a separate commandment of matzah. And even today, when we don't have the paschal lamb, we do have the commandment of eating matzah. Now, what is matzah? Matzah has two ingredients in it: flour and water. It's a very big commandment to eat matzah on the first night of Passover. Very, very essential to Judaism to eat matzah on the first night of Passover. On the other hand, it is a big sin. One of the biggest sins in Judaism is to eat chametz all of the 7 or 8 days of Passover. Very, very big sin. The worst punishment for eating, the punishment is from heaven. Eating what is chametz made of? Chametz is made of the two ingredients, water and flour. So it comes out that chametz and matzah are made of the exact same thing. Exactly the same. The difference between chametz and matzah is that you leave the matzah alone in a warm room for a very short amount of time, or even in a normal temperature room for 9 minutes or 10 minutes, something like that, alone. And it starts to ferment inside, and it becomes chametz. So the difference is an infinitesimally small, very seemingly insignificant difference. It's just same ingredients, both of them are kosher. You just leave them alone for a while, and it rises up, and it becomes one of the biggest sins in Judaism. And so it is also in the two words, chametz and matzah. The two words are also very similar. The word chametz and the word matzah both have they only three letters, very similar. And two of the letters are identical, mem and tzadik. Chametz, mem tzadik, chet mem tzadik, and matzah is mem tzadik again with a hey at the end. So the difference between chametz and matzah is only one letter. Two of the letters are identical, but matzah has the letter hey, and chametz, which is really bad, has the letter chet. And what is the difference between that? The letter chet and the letter hey? Also almost nothing. They're shaped exactly the same. Maybe there's no two letters that are so similar in the whole aleph base as chet and tzaddik. I'm saying chet and hey, I'm sorry. What's the difference? A chet has three sticks that are all joined, and a hey has three sticks. But one of them is not joined. The one that's on the left side is not joined to the top. If there's a little tiny space, then that's a hey. If that space is closed, then it's a chet. So says the Rebbe, this very small difference, both in ingredients and both in the letters, is a tremendous difference in meaning. Matzah shows that the person is open to something higher than himself. He's open to the Creator. He has what we call emunah, faith. He's open to things that are above his understanding. With that, by the way, is the reason why religious Jews wear this kippah. It's called in Yiddish, it's called the yarmulka. Yarmulka means yireh malka, the fear of the king. In other words, we realize my understanding and my intelligence goes up to here, but what's above my intelligence is much greater. So both are important. Your intelligence is, of course, important. It's you. But on the other hand, don't forget that as much as a percentage of the world you take up, what's above your percentage is above your intelligence is an infinitely greater percentage. And why is it called fear? So there's things that are above me. Why? Because when you realize that God is not just above me and that He's greater than me, when you start to realize that God creates me, all there is a God. God is creating everything constantly in a big miracle. Then that brings a certain amount of awe and fear, that you realize that your whole being and your whole existence depends on God. But God is good, and that's the message to the Jewish people, that even though He's creating us, and you've got what to be afraid of, but you should know that God is good, and that's why He's creating you. So, you don't have to worry. And worrying doesn't help anyway, even no matter what it was, it wouldn't. Okay. So that's the difference between chametz and matzah. Why do we eat this on Passover? Because Passover is the birth of the Jewish people. And when the Jewish people were born from what they were born from. They were born from Egypt. They were born from being natural, normal. When they went out of Egypt, they went out of being nature. They went out of all the limitations of nature and normal. And they had the ability of bringing the Creator into the creation. So let's continue on about this difference between matzah and Passover and chametz. Matzah represents being open to something above you. Chametz means being closed to what's above you and being open only to the world. Both are open to the world. Matzah has a big opening on the bottom. The hay has a big opening, and the chet has a big opening. But the hay has a little opening on the top. So that means that when a person is influenced by the world, he's got a little opening thinking, well, what does God want? What does God want me to do here? Why did God put me in this situation? Or as the saying goes, God never does anything to us, He does everything for us. So anything that happens, a person can say, well, what is this benefiting? How is this benefiting me? What's the point? And even if you can't figure it out, but at least you have faith that it is somehow or other only for the good. So that's the difference between matzah and chametz. Matzah means going out of Egypt. Chametz means staying in Egypt. And you have to remember that when the Jews left Egypt, one of the first things they did, want to go back. They wanted to go back to Egypt. So being out of Egypt is a little bit scary because you don't know what's going to happen. The next moment, you're depending on God. Being in Egypt is much, much more, stable. All they had to do was bring straw and make bricks and get beaten up once in a while, and that's it. They didn't have any worries. They were all taken care of. They had their housing was provided for them. Their philosophy was provided for them. What to think, what to say, what to do. But they had stability, right? They had stability. People like that, comfort zones. That was the purpose of matzah, was to open them up to what's above and let God take care of the future. Don't be afraid. Don't look all the time for my comfort and my this and my this. But exactly the opposite, that God will comfort you. Right? But you'll live a dynamic life, a life of... Okay. Okay, let us continue. We're going to jump to paragraph Yud Bey 12. Where is it's late? Where is B'derech klal, generally, nitan lomar, it's possible to say, shekol rabboteinu, all of our rabbis, Nesiei Yisrael, the leaders of the Jewish people, ad kabed kedushas moriad mir chamor, chami, until his honor, his holiness, my father-in-law, our teacher, including him, all the rabbis of Chabad were one thing. Now, uniquely, all the rabbis of Chabad, that their interest was in all the Jewish people. Not just in the Chabad Chassidim, but all of the Jewish people. The problem is, when they were in Russia, they weren't free to worry about Jews that were outside of Russia. They had no possible influence. You couldn't influence Jews that were outside. But once the previous Rebbe, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, when he got out of Russia in 1928-29, as he went to Poland was also very turbulent. But when he came to America, which was 1940, as then he was able to actually, put in action his concern and his worry for every single Jew in the world, that every single Jew in the world should know about what God is, know about what Torah is, not just the Chabad Chassidim, to the point where he took all of his Chassidim and he sent them all over the place. And that was carried on by his son-in-law, who took over in 1950. That's why we're learning on 1951 to be exact. So the worry was for every Jew in the entire world, and not just in a passive way, that if people came to them, they would help them, but in an active way, to actually send letters and send emissaries and try to find Jews who were distant from anything to do with Judaism and didn't want to have anything to do with Judaism. They hated Judaism. And that had an effect on them. Okay. Generally speaking, we can say that all of the rabbis of Chabad are the same thing. Kol echad mehem, each one of them, osek, worked b'shleimut b'kol shtachim. They tried to bring perfection in all aspects of Judaism, including being a working man and still being attached to God, to be a performer, still be attached to God. Anything that a person does and everything that a person does every moment of the day can be attached to the Creator, because the Creator creates everything. And that's the job of the Jewish people, is to reveal this fact, that God is creating everything from love, and that everything has to be corrected, fixed, put in the proper place, like a big puzzle. That's what it says, Malay Makom Avotav, that each Rebbe fills the place of his predecessors. Muvan Amiloi means filling the place, filling. Malay Makom means that he fills his place, that when one Rebbe passes away, and the Rebbe that takes over after him, he fills the place of that Rebbe. In other words, he takes over in completion, totally, all of the love of the Jews and the care for the Jews and the worry for the Jews that each Rebbe before him had, and usually increases. But nevertheless, each one of the Rebbes had a special, unique quality that relating to him, that he was especially interested and excited about, and through this, he did everything else. Everything else came. Some of the Rebbes, for instance, their main thing was just spreading out the ideas of Chassidut. Just spreading out ideas. We'll see. Behetem lemuzbar, like it says in Igeras HaKodesh, like it says in the second and last chapter of the book, the Tanya, the fourth book of the Tanya, which is called Holy Letters. Betochen Mamri Rizal, what it says, Avuch B'mai Zahir Tefei. It says, your father, what was he most special? The word Zahir means to shine. In other words, a person could say, I care more about this commandment than all the others. I do all the commandments, but this one resonates by me. Av she'omnam kayem es kol mitzvos, even though that a person does all of the commandments, hare, but yeshno, there is to each and every person, ein yuchad, something special, hameshemesh shar, which is, so to speak, a gate to his soul. It opens up his soul, it really talks to him. Darko olim Torah of mitzvahs, and through this go up all of the Torah and all of his commandments. Right? Some people, they really have a connection to do charity. Some have really a connection to dancing, to singing. Right? Some people have a connection to learning Mishnah, to learning Gemara. Each person has his own special thing, something to give charity. Rayon ze to'em gam is davar kavod kedushes morichami. This is also the previous Rebbe expressed in his speeches. He said, Chalukas hadargos bein ha-rebbeim, the kuvanas lechalukas bein ha-sfiros, that each one of the Rebbes, the difference of each one of the 7 Rebbes of Chabad, is the difference also in the Kabbalistic idea of the Sfirot. The Sfirot are 10 aspects of godliness. 10 aspects of God. It says in the Torah that God has no form. But on the other hand, it says that man is made in God's form. So does God have a form or doesn't have a form? So the answer is yes. God does have a form and he doesn't. God, of course, is infinite. But on the other hand, God relates to the world and he creates the world through what's called as 10 sfirot, 10 facets of God's personality. There are things that God likes, things he doesn't like. Sometimes God is kind, sometimes God is strict, sometimes he's severe. God creates all the infinite details in the world. God is connected to the world. That's Netzach, Hod, Yesod, all these different aspects. These are different aspects of God. Just parenthetically, that is the antidote to idolatry. What's idolatry? Idolatry preaches, there's a lot of different forms of idolatry, but there's one commonality. And idolatry preaches that God is so far away from the world. God exists, but he's so far away from the world that you cannot possibly influence him alone. You have to have something in the middle to influence him, so you can pray to God through that thing. And that's a more benign type of idolatry, where you're worshiping God through something else. That's called idolatry. It's called partnership, shutafut. But there's a worse type of idolatry, and that is that a person says that God is so far away that there's no sense in praying to him at all. It's like, going to the President of the United States to ask him to fix the traffic light on your road or the street light. For that, you don't even go to the mayor. For that, you go to the whatever superintendent or whoever the roads commissioner. Something like that. The same thing, there are people that they do not pray to the Creator. They don't pray to God. They pray to some power, the power of good, the power of love, the power of this, about it. They pray to one of God's ministers, one of God's angels, one of God's children. You can't do that. You're not allowed to pray to anything. We can talk about that later. But then all of the Rebbes of Chabad correspond to one of these aspects of God. The Rebbes of Habal Shem Tov and the Magid, that's Keter. That's before Chabad. Admor Zaken, he was the first Rebbe of Chabad. That's what's called Chochmah. Admor MC, the second Rebbe of Chabad, is Bina, etc. That each Sefira, of course, contains in it all the other 10. But all the Rebbes express themselves more through one of these spheres of God's personality than another. In other words, each one of the Rebbes reflects a different facet of God's personality. So it is in our Rebbes. Asher b'inyan ha'miyuchad yitmaser kol Rebbe b'doro. Each Rebbe has his facet that he shined in his generation according to that sphera, that aspect of God that he is relevant to mostly. What about the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe? No one's speaking about the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe because he passed away, and which was the culmination and the sum total of all the amazing things that he did in his life. How can we summarize the nature of the previous Rebbe? That his nature was bitzua kol davar b'pol mamash, action. Bitpashtut yoter, to actually do things, not just to tell what should be done, not to talk about the how to do things, what should be done, the reason for doing things, explaining how great God is, how much God loves us, how much God will help us if we do, but to actually do. Of course, he did the other things as well, but the main thing was it covered Kadush Danmor lo hatria matzavo ruchani shalazulot. The previous Rebbe was not, was not set back by the spiritual lackings of other people. There was even people that hated him, that hated God, and they hated the Torah, God forbid. Nevertheless, it did not discourage him one iota from actually doing good and helping these people as much as possible, physically and spiritually. Whether the person that needed help was a person that had the fear of God totally, or the Mida Beinonit, or whether he was an average person, and even if he was such a person, that his animal soul totally ruled over him. Till he did not even know at all that he should do tshuva. No matter what state a person was in, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, would give him chesed gashmi, physical. There was times when the previous Rebbe gave loans to people who hated him, who were communists, hated him, because they didn't have what to eat. And hoping that this would bring also a spiritual improvement in the person. Because when a person knows that it was done to him, a kindness, physically, then the person is, like the Rebbe say, a person cannot spit in the face of someone who he owes money to, or he owes a favor to. Because of this, so therefore it would improve his spiritual. Suddenly the person would think, hey, maybe these religious people are not so bad. Maybe Judaism is not so impractical. Maybe none of my friends help me like this. Maybe Judaism is for me. Nosaf alma shekotev, we're talking about Jews. Nosaf alma shekotev bad Marzaki, in addition to what the Rebbe writes in the Tanya, and if it says over there in the 32nd chapter of the Tanya, that you have to try to befriend and show warmth and openness to every single Jew, and try to draw them to Torah mitzvahs. And if you don't succeed, lo yifsid schar mitzvah av Yisrael. At least you did the commandment of loving another Jew. Maybe davar zeh gam li'dei shazulato chozer b'tshuva. He could bring this that other people also would start thinking, maybe I should consider God more seriously, the Torah more seriously, and the tshuva. The previous Rebbe brought it into actuality. That was his main thing, action. Hitnahagut zu shel Rebbe. No matter Moshe Rabbeinu. We can learn this. Where did the Rebbe get this idea to do? A Jew that doesn't act properly, you got to keep away from him. It could have an effect on you. Right? It could disturb you. And maybe, let's say, you can say to him, good morning, whatever, but you don't invest time and energy in a person like this. It's a wasted cause. It's better to have your own pupils and people who want to learn from you and to learn from them. That's better. Says the Rebbe, no, maybe you think it's better, but Moses didn't think it was better. Moshe Rabbeinu, the founder of Judaism, he thought like the previous Rebbe thought, or of course more exactly the previous Rebbe thought like Moses thought. We can learn this from Moshe Rabbeinu, the Manig of Roy Yisrael Rishon, the first Jew to lead the Jewish people. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were the founders of the Jewish people, but they didn't have any followers. They didn't have any troubles. They didn't have any difficulties. There was no other Jews to rebel against them. Ne'amar says, says this is the last book of the Torah, of the Bible. It says that these are the words that Moshe Rabbeinu said, Moses said to the Jewish people just before they were going to the land of Israel. Before the Jews were going to the land of Israel, Moshe reminded them of all of the troubles that they had made for him and for God for the 40 years that they were wandering around in the desert and receiving only benefits from both of them. Moses devoted all of his time to the Jews. God was giving the Jews bread from heaven, water from a rock, protecting them with clouds. He took them out of Egyptian slavery, bondage. He was bringing them to a beautiful, holy land. What could you want more than that? The Jews had an ideal, and they were complaining all the time. All the time they were complaining. Well, Jews enjoy complaining. That one thing, and also another thing, God did not take that away from them also. Jews enjoy complaining so much. God says, you enjoy it, complain, I'll let you complain also, right? I'm not going to take that away from you. So they weren't hungry, and they weren't thirsty, and they weren't endangered, and they were able to complain also. That for a Jew, that's heaven. There's nothing better than that. What could be better than that? And nevertheless, they said to God, we don't like it. We want to go back to Egypt. Stay in the desert and complain. What do you do? No, we're going back to Egypt, and we don't like it over there. In Egypt, you couldn't complain. In Egypt, they would kill you. Yeah, but we don't want something to complain about. Before they went into the land of Israel, as Moses gave them words of reproof. Reproof. After I destroyed Sichon, a big king that wanted to destroy the Jews. After Moshe did all these good things for the Jewish people, then you can tell them Divrei Musa. You can't take a person and say you're not a good person, you're doing bad things. First of all, do the person a favor. Show the person you really care for him. Genuinely also do care for him. Don't just make it an act. Do care for him. And then you can tell him what's wrong with him. Then maybe your reproof will be accepted. Umasiga at the totzot, and it will result in proper. It'll attain the proper results that you wanted, namely that the person will better his ways. This Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to show that the Jewish people are going to be eternal, and the Jewish people always need a leader, and the Jewish people are always going to make troubles for their leader. That's what it's going to be. What should you do, the leader of the Jewish people, when the Jewish people start to rebel and make trouble? What are you supposed to do? Do them favors. Help them. This is for the Moses of every generation. Lahashpia betchila chesed. First of all, help every Jew. Give them blessings. And try to bring them success. V'rak az, and only then, to tell them what's wrong with them. Seder zeh chayav liot afilu kasher hatochacha hi al inyan ha'maaseh ha'egel. Even when it was on the worshipping the golden calf. Remember Moses here was reproving the Jewish people on one of the worst sins maybe the worst sin that ever happened in the history of the world. The Jewish people were told by God at Mount Sinai, they all heard, don't worship anything else except for me. I'm the God who took you out of Egypt. Don't worship anything except for the God who took you out of Egypt. And 40 days after they all heard this and they all were shaken and it says their souls jumped out of their bodies, they said, God, we're going to do everything you say. You can be sure, because now we know that God, you exist and you created the world and you took us out of Egypt. Whatever you say we'll do. Don't worship idols. For sure we got it written down, not to worship idols. Right? 40 days after the giving of the Torah, what did they say? Let's worship idols. And they all worship, worst sin you could possibly have. They heard it directly from God. Nevertheless, Moshe still, after that, was kind to them, treated them nicely for the rest of the 39 years, whatever, that they were wandering around in the desert. Mm-hmm. Only after you do all these good things to them, then after, right at the end of the 40 years, they wandered in the desert, chayev liot afilu kasher tochacha yalinyan, like the Maisa Egel, the exact opposite of faith. Nevertheless, you have to do good. And you see this by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He would stand every Sunday and he would give out dollars and blessings to people, right? He never once gave curses to somebody, right? A person would go by and he'd say, not you, buddy, I'm not giving you $1, right? I know exactly what you did on January the 3rd, 19, never had such a thing like that. The Rebbe never gave a person a bad look or a curse or something like that, right? Even there was a guy that wanted to give the Rebbe a missionary book. And the Rebbe said, I'll take this in order that there'll be one less in the world, right? And he was saying, that the person said, no, this is the truth. The Rebbe said, listen, you're saying that because you're sick, you're ill. You're not healthy, you don't understand. He said, I feel perfectly healthy. And the Rebbe said, that's a sign how really ill you are. If a sick person doesn't know that he's ill, thinks he's healthy, you're really not healthy, right? You're really not healthy. But the Rebbe never said, burn in hell or something like that, which was probably what I would say, or any normal person would say. But the Rebbe, because he's a leader of the Jewish people, right, like bin Laden coming up to to Trump or something and saying, here's a book about how to destroy America, right? What did Trump say? Get this guy out of here, right? Mm-hmm. Right? Here's a person giving the Rebbe a book, how to destroy Judaism. Right? The Rebbe should have said, what, you realize? You're nuts, you're crazy, get out of here, you're cursed. The Rebbe said, no, I understand you're just sick, you don't know what you're saying. No. You get rid of the books. In other words, you have to do people, he gave him $1, says you have to take this $1, you can change it if you want to give charity, right? You give charity to other people like I'm giving to you. First of all, you have to do good for people, and then afterwards, that was the thing of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, to do good for people, to help people physically and to help people spiritually as much as he could, and then after that, to encourage them to improve their ways and to act, think, and speak differently.